Even though the vast majority of 19th century U.S. conservationists enthralled by the Great Audubon were elite hunters and anglers, there was also a slow-burning, idiosyncratic group of naturalists, epitomized by Henry David Thoreau. Thoreau was a careful student of the New England ecosystem and was deeply influenced by William Bartram's travels through North and South Carolina, Georgia, East and West Florida, the Cherokee Country, the extensive territories of the Muskogulges or Creek Confederacy, and the country of Choctaws, 1794. His own long, sulking sojourns at Walden Pond and lonely hikes in the dank woodlands of Maine had transformed this one-time Harvard man of letters into a semi-hermetic Concord naturalist. It was Thoreau, in a seminal article in the Atlantic Monthly in 1858, who most passionately articulated a need to save wilderness for wilderness's sake. Why should not we, Thoreau asked with mounting enthusiasm, have our national preserves, in which the bear and panther, and some even of the hunter race, Indians, may still exist and not be civilized off the face of the earth, and our forests saved, not for idle sport or food, but for inspiration, and our own true recreation. Although this prescient article was added as a last chapter to Thoreau's classic The Maine Woods after his death, our great national hermit, in truth, was an anomaly in pre-Civil War America. His condemnation of the war on wilderness was, as the conservationist scholar Doug Stewart put it, a mere whisper in the popular conscience. Instead, the pilot light credit for galvanizing what the conservationist Aldo Leopold in A Sand County Almanac, 1949, called the land ethic, belonged to well-to-do eastern seaboard hunters who loomed over the early campaigns to create wilderness preserves. In other words, Thoreau the poet contemplated nature preserves in the Atlantic Monthly, while hunting clubs, like the Adirondack Club and the Bisbee Club circa 1870, started actually creating preserves in the Adirondacks. Long before Theodore Roosevelt, John Muir, and Gifford Pinchot were born, in fact, New York's aristocratic hunters, using sportsmen's newspapers and circulars to deliver their message, challenged loggers and sawmill operators and every other kind of forest exploiter to abandon their reckless clear-cutting. They wanted places like the Adirondacks saved for aesthetic and recreational pleasures. The precedent these pioneering gentleman hunters started needed an indefatigable champion like Theodore Roosevelt to put the U.S. government fully on the side of the bird and game and forest preserves. When the story of the national government's part in wildlife protection is finally written, it will be found that while he was president, Theodore Roosevelt made a record in that field that is indeed enough to make a reign illustrious. William T. Hornaday, the legendary director of the New York Zoological Park, wrote in Our Vanishing Wildlife, 1913, "He aided every wildlife cause that lay within the bounds of possibility, and he gave the vanishing birds and mammals the benefit of every doubt." Even though Roosevelt's alliance with Chapman and other visionary naturalists like Hornaday launched the modern conservation movement between 1901 and 1909, Roosevelt's preservationist vein, first developed in 1887, has been unfairly minimized by scholars. Partly that's due to a bias against aristocratic hunters. In addition, historians studying the Progressive era have been confused by, or failed even to recognize, the distinction between hunting game birds and helping save songbirds that are unfit to eat. Crowds of scholars have unfairly rounded on Roosevelt for having a bloodlust. Nevertheless, to Roosevelt, gentleman hunters were the true front line in the nature preservation movement. Over the years, however, historians have usually deemed Roosevelt first and foremost a conservationist, a term first seriously coined in 1865 by George Perkins Marsh in Man and Nature, but not popularized until the publication in 1910 of Gifford Pinchot's manifesto, The Fight for Conservation. to which ex-President Roosevelt provided an introduction. Conservation, Pinchot famously wrote, means the greatest good, to the greatest number, for the longest time.